20 to 50 years. That is how long a lung can stay quiet after a veteran breathed in asbestos aboard a ship before the cough and the chest pain arrive. And a veteran wrote in under our burn pit registry video with a very specific question. What about red lead and asbestos? The stuff we chipped and painted and breathed for years. So we built this entire video to answer that one veteran. And everybody's standing in the same spot. Here's the trap that swallows these claims. And I want it in your head before we do anything else. Asbestos and lead are not on the PACT Act presumptive list, and most veterans read that as case closed. It is the opposite of case closed. There is a whole separate door built exactly for this, and almost nobody walks through it.
Erica here, and that word presumptive is the hinge this entire episode swings on. When a condition is presumptive, the VA assumes the link to your service for you. Burn pits, Agent Orange, radiation, those live on that list. Asbestos and lead do not, and the primary VA source is blunt about it. There is no presumption of asbestos exposure in service.
I am Michael, and I care about the part you can actually act on tonight. So if it is not presumptive, we do not shrug and walk away. We prove it directly, and there is a real, repeatable stack of steps to do exactly that. By the end of this, you will know each one in the order the VA actually wants them.
And May here with the reason this is worth your time. Too many veterans skip it because they assume not on the list means no claim, and that assumption is expensive. Because look at the top of the scale. Mesothelioma, the cancer most tied to asbestos, is commonly rated at 100%. At that level, a veteran with a spouse is looking at $4,158.17 a month in 2026. This is not a small benefit hiding in a footnote.
And that assumption is exactly the thing to challenge. Elena, you pulled the exact question the comments keep asking, so put it to us and answer it straight.
I did, because it deserves a straight answer right at the top. The question veterans keep asking is this: if asbestos is not on the presumptive list, do I even have a VA claim at all? And the honest answer is yes, you very likely do. It is just a harder road than a presumptive, and this whole video is the map for that road. So today we cover what these two poisons are, where you met them in uniform, the diseases they cause decades later, the exact difference between the easy presumptive door and the direct door you will actually use, and how to file it. Everything we build lives at professorerica.com, and we made this one for a veteran who asked. Coming up, the part nobody warns you about, the single assumption that leaves a 100% claim unfiled. Erica, start us on what red lead and asbestos actually are.
Let us name these two things precisely, because a vague claim is a weak claim. Start with asbestos. It is a naturally occurring fibrous silicate mineral, and for most of the 20th century it was treated as a miracle material. It resists fire, it resists heat, and it insulates. The military wrapped its ships and its pipes in it. Here is the actual mineral raw, because a lot of people have never seen it. That silky white bundle is what the military prized for fireproofing on ships, pipes, and buildings. And those fibers are the whole story. Intact inside a wall or a gasket, it mostly leaves you alone, but the danger begins the moment it is disturbed, and those microscopic fibers go airborne, where you breathe them straight into your lungs. And here is the cruel part of the design. The very thing that made it valuable, that it does not break down, is exactly what makes it deadly. Your body cannot dissolve those fibers, so they lodge in the lung tissue and stay for decades, quietly scarring. The extent of the exposure does not have to be huge for that to happen.
The second poison is a cousin of the first in a strange way. Think of asbestos as the insulation and red lead as the armor. Red lead is lead tetroxide, and this is what it looks like: a vivid orange powder mixed into primer paint. For a century, it was the anti-rust coat brushed onto steel hulls, bridges, and metal structures. And the exposure pattern is different from asbestos in a way that matters for your claim. You did not usually breathe red lead by touching a fresh coat. You breathed it when you prepped the old coat. Chipping it, sanding it, grinding it, torching it, that is when the lead lifts off the metal and into the air around your face.
And there is a reason the military was soaked in both of them, which helps you understand why so many veterans are affected. These were not fringe materials. Asbestos was the standard insulation and red lead was the standard rust primer for most of the 20th century, so they were everywhere the government built something that had to survive heat, fire, or salt water. A warship is basically a floating case study in both.
So the practical takeaway here, and this feeds straight into how you file, is that these are two specific named substances, not a general cloud of toxic dust. You do not claim exposure. You claim a diagnosed condition and you point to asbestos or to lead as the cause. Naming the specific substance is the first place a strong claim beats a lazy one.
Good. So we know what they are. Asbestos, the fiber you inhale, and red lead, the primer you sand into the air. Now the question every veteran is really asking: where in my service did I actually meet these two, and does my job count? Real quick, because this next part matters to you. If any of this is helping, tap that like button, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next one finds you. Both are free and take about a second, but they tell the algorithm to show this to one more person who needs it. Nearly every Navy ship built from the 1930s into the 1980s had asbestos woven into it. Fireproofing, insulation, soundproofing, it was mandated aboard ship for decades. So if you served below deck in that era, the odds you were near it are very high. Let me put a face on it. Picture a real Iowa-class battleship at sea, guns firing, and now picture what is behind those bulkheads. The worst rooms were the engine rooms and the boiler rooms, because the most heat-resistant asbestos was packed exactly where the heat was. Poor ventilation, and fibers that could hang in that air for hours. That is where the water tenders and the machinist mates worked their whole enlistment.
And it was not only the sailors standing the watch. The exposure spread to the trades that built and maintained the ship. Pipe fitters and ship fitters, hull technicians and welders, insulators wrapping the legging around every steam line. Shipyard workers breathed it by the thousands in yards so thick with dust that people said you could not see across them.
Now let me get concrete about the red lead side, because this is where a lot of non-Navy veterans wrongly count themselves out. Watch what actually kicks the lead into the air. This is the job. A worker in coveralls and a face shield, grinding old primer off a metal structure, sparks and dust flying off the steel. Every branch did some version of this. Chipping and repainting a hull, sanding an aircraft skin, prepping a vehicle frame or a piece of shore equipment. And lead has a second doorway that surprises people: the indoor firing range, where airborne lead from the rounds builds up in a poorly ventilated room.
There is one more place both of these hid, and it is easy to forget: the old buildings themselves. Barracks and base structures built before the mid-1970s commonly held asbestos and lead paint, so a renovation or a demolition detail could expose a soldier who never set foot on a ship. And overseas, damaged older buildings released it into the air too.
Let me make that concrete with one veteran. Picture Sergeant Ruiz, an Army combat engineer, who spent a summer gutting a 1960s motor pool, tearing out old floor tile and pipe wrap with no respirator because nobody thought twice about it then. He never served a day at sea. Under the old myth, he assumes asbestos is a Navy problem and skips the claim. That is a real exposure his branch and his job actually document.
So the honest summary is a spectrum, not a wall. The heaviest exposure skews Navy and skews before the mid-70s, and that is simply where the material was thickest. But the trades, the ranges, and the old buildings pull in every branch and later years too. Do not disqualify yourself in your own head.
And here is the twist that makes this benefit so easy to miss. You could have breathed all of this decades ago and feel completely fine today. Because the damage does not announce itself on any reasonable schedule. Let us talk about the long, quiet wait.
The thing that makes asbestos uniquely sneaky is the wait. The VA's own public health page says the symptoms, the shortness of breath, the cough, the chest pain, often do not appear until 20 to 50 years after the exposure. The adjudication manual puts the latency at 10 to 45 or more years. Either way, we are talking decades. Picture the whole gap on one line. On the day you served, you breathed it in, and nothing hurt. That is the trap. That long silent stretch changes how you should think about your own claim.
And the diseases at the end of that wait are serious, so let us be precise. On the asbestos side, the manual lists asbestosis, which is scarring of the lung, plus pleural plaques and effusions, and lung cancer. Asbestosis, the lung scarring, is the most common of them, but the one people fear most is on that list too: mesothelioma of the pleura and the peritoneum. The manual also names cancers of the larynx and the gastrointestinal tract as asbestos-related. This is not a minor irritation, it is a family of cancers.
LEAD writes a different list, and it is worth knowing because veterans miss it. Long-term lead exposure hits the nervous system, so decreased memory and concentration, and weakness in the fingers, wrists, or ankles. It nudges blood pressure up. It causes anemia, and at severe levels it damages the brain and the kidneys. There is no single lead rating. The VA rates whichever of those conditions you actually have.
May, I can see the question forming on you, and it is the one every veteran asks at exactly this point. Go ahead and put it to us.
Yes, and it is the fear underneath all of this. If my symptoms only showed up 40 years after I got out, does that long gap actually hurt my claim or count against me?
It does not, and that is the crucial thing. The VA's own timelines expect that gap, so a 40-year delay is normal, not suspicious. What matters is the diagnosis and the exposure, not how long the disease took to surface.
Which brings us to the single most important sentence in this whole scene. Feeling fine today does not close the door. Because the latency is so long, a diagnosis that shows up 30 or 40 years after you left service is still a completely valid claim. The clock on the disease is not the clock on your right to file.
I have seen this stop people cold, so I will say it plainly. A veteran gets the diagnosis at 70 and thinks, "My service was in 1972, surely it is too late." It is not too late. The disease took that long by nature, and the VA's own timelines expect exactly that gap.
So the disease can hide for half a lifetime, and the claim survives the wait. Good, but here is where the road forks. And picking the wrong path is where I have watched strong cases fall apart. Presumptive versus direct. Let us settle it in the room. Here is the fork that decides everything, and I want it argued, not narrated. A presumptive claim and a direct claim are two different animals, and the whole worry from that veteran who wrote in lives right here. So let us take it seriously. Erica, make the case for why a veteran should feel encouraged. Michael, you push back on how hard this actually is. I will keep us honest and land the verdict.
The encouraging case is real, so I will make it. On a presumptive condition, the VA does the hardest part for you. It assumes your service caused the disease. You bring the diagnosis and the qualifying service, and the link is granted by law. Burn pits and Agent Orange work that way, and it is a beautiful shortcut when you qualify for it.
And that is exactly my pushback, because asbestos and lead do not get that shortcut. The primary VA source says it flat out, there is no presumption of asbestos exposure in service. So every ounce of proof the presumptive veteran skips, the asbestos veteran has to carry. That is not encouraging, that is a heavier pack.
Hold on. Same disease, two different burdens of proof.
It is a heavier pack, Michael, I will grant you that completely. But heavier is not impossible, and I think framing it as a dead end is the exact mistake that leaves money on the table. The direct door is a known, well-worn path. Thousands of asbestos claims are granted every year through it. It just asks you to prove 3 things instead of 1.
Let me referee that for a second, because you are both right and talking past each other. Picture 2 claims side by side. The presumptive one is cushioned. The system absorbs the hard part for you. The direct one is bare, so you feel every step. Neither is better in the abstract, Michael. They just ask different things of the veteran. So which is it? A wall or a heavier pack you can actually carry?
A heavier pack when you put it that way. And I will concede the honest version of my own point. It is harder, but it is a defined kind of harder. There is a checklist, not a mystery. If someone hands me the 3 things I have to prove, I can go build each one that I can work with.
And picture the 2 veterans side by side to see it clearly. One served near burn pits and files for a presumptive lung condition, and the VA connects it almost automatically. The other worked a ship's boiler room for years, files asbestosis, and has to hand over the diagnosis, the service record, and a doctor's opinion. Both can win. The second one just has to bring more to the table, and that is the resolution, really. The direct path costs you more effort up front, and the honest trade-off is that some direct claims fail where a presumptive would have sailed through. But walking away because it is not presumptive is the single most expensive assumption a veteran makes on this topic.
So here is the verdict, and it is sourced, not a vibe. Asbestos and lead are not presumptive. That is settled fact from VA.gov, which states plainly there is no presumption of asbestos exposure in service. That they are absolutely claimable by direct service connection, and the VA grants those claims routinely through its own asbestos development rules. So Michael is right that it is a heavier pack, and Erica is right that it is a pack you can carry. The right move is never to give up. It is to prove the 3 things the direct door asks for, and those 3 things are exactly where we go next.
Direct service connection stands on 3 legs, and if anyone is missing, the whole thing falls over. Think of it like a 3-legged stool, because that is the map for the rest of your claim, and it is worth carrying in your head. Leg 1, a current diagnosis. A doctor has to name the disease you have today: asbestosis, mesothelioma, kidney disease from lead, whatever it is. No diagnosis, no claim, so this is where everything starts.
So leg 1 is the doctor's diagnosis. What is the second leg?
Leg 2, in-service exposure. You show you actually met asbestos or lead in uniform through your job, your records, and statements. This is the leg that trips up the most claims, and we will spend real time on it. And leg 3, the nexus. A medical opinion connecting the 2, saying this disease came from that exposure. 3 legs, and the stool needs all of them, so miss one and the claim cannot stand.
And that nexus has a specific phrase you should know because it is the exact language a doctor needs to write. The opinion has to say it is at least as likely as not that your condition is related to service. That means a 50% or greater probability. Not certain, not beyond doubt. 50-50 is enough to win.
Now, the leg that veterans stumble on most is the exposure one, because it feels the vaguest. So I asked us to bring in someone who works with these toxic exposure claims constantly to sharpen it. Elena, you had the line ready.
I did. Let me call in Professor Harlan, who knows these VA toxic exposure claims inside out, to take the exposure question head on. Give me 1 second to get him on the line.
Happy to join you. And you are right that exposure is where these claims live or die. The mistake I see most is a veteran writing one vague sentence: "I think I was around asbestos." That is not enough. The strong version connects your specific specialty to a specific place and task. I was a boiler technician on a ship in the engine room around lagged steam lines for 3 years. That sentence does real work.
So the fix is specificity. Name the job, the space, and the task, not just the material. What evidence backs it up?
Two kinds people forget: your service records that show your occupation and buddy statements. A shipmate who can say we chipped that primer together in that compartment. And do not underrate that. Lay statements are real evidence. A credible account of the work tied to your documented job is often what carries the whole exposure leg.
That squares exactly with the VA's written evidence list, Professor Harlan, thank you. Medical records for the diagnosis, service records that list your job or specialty, and a doctor's statement connecting the exposure to the condition. 3 legs, 3 kinds of proof.
One quick thing on that nexus opinion, Professor Harlan, because people get it wrong. It is not enough for a doctor to just write the words "at least as likely as not." What makes it strong?
The reasoning behind it. A bare conclusion carries little weight. The examiner wants the doctor to explain why, the exposure history, the type of disease, the pattern that fits asbestos. A well-reasoned opinion beats a confident one-liner every time.
Appreciate you jumping on, Professor Harlan. So the 3 legs are diagnosis, exposure, and nexus, and the exposure leg is one with specificity plus records plus buddy statements. Now, the VA does not weigh every job's exposure the same. Some occupations get a big head start. Let us look at how they rank it. The VA does not treat a cook and a boiler technician as equally exposed, and that is actually good news if you know where you sit. There is a tool called the Duty Months Exposure Matrix, built with the Department of Defense, and it sorts military occupations into likelihood tiers for asbestos.
There are 3 tiers on that matrix, stacked from most exposed down to least, and where your job lands tells you how much of the exposure leg the VA may concede for you before you lift a finger. At the top, highly probable. These are the specialties that lived in the exposure: the boiler technicians, the pipe fitters, the machinist's mates, the water tenders. If your record shows one of these, the VA is far more likely to just concede that you were exposed. That is a huge head start on leg 2.
The middle tier is probable, which covers a wide range of below-deck and shipboard support roles that were around the material regularly but not buried in it. It is a solid position to file from. And the bottom tier is minimal, and the VA's own examples there are the deck jobs, the seaman recruit and apprentice, the boatswain's mate, and the commissaryman. Lower starting odds, but read the next point carefully, because minimal is not the end of the story.
But here is the trap I do not want anyone to fall into, and it is the mirror image of the presumptive trap from earlier. A minimal rating on that matrix is not a rejection. It is a starting probability, not a verdict on you. Plenty of veterans in minimal jobs were still heavily exposed because of a specific detail or a specific ship.
Right, so this is where the buddy statements Professor Harlan talked about earn their keep. If the matrix puts your job at minimal, you do not quit. You rebuild the exposure with the specifics. I personally scraped primer in that compartment. Here is the shipmate who did it beside me. Evidence can beat a low starting tier.
And expect one more step along the way so it does not surprise you. The VA will usually schedule a compensation and pension exam, what people call a C&P exam. A VA examiner looks at your records, may run a breathing test if a lung disease is claimed, and writes an opinion. Answer honestly and describe your worst days, not your best ones, because that exam heavily shapes both the service connection and the rating.
So find where your specialty sits and use it. A highly probable job is a gift. Hand the VA your service record and let the matrix do the work. A minimal job is a challenge, not a wall, so you bring the specific proof. Either way, you land at the same place, a documented exposure. Now let us make it physical. What form and which box?
Let us make all of this physical, because a claim is not a feeling, it is a form. The form is VA Form 21526EZ, the application for disability compensation and related compensation benefits, and the version in front of you should say January 2026. Let me show you the exact spot on it that matters for our topic. Look at Section 4, Exposure Information. Item 15A asks you straight out, are you claiming any conditions related to toxic exposures? You check yes. That single yes is what routes your claim into the toxic exposure track instead of a generic one. Then item 15D gives you a list of exposure types to check off, and right there is a box literally labeled asbestos, and another for a military occupational specialty related toxin, which is your home for red lead. You check the one that fits your service.
And notice the discipline that carries over from earlier. In Section 5, where you list the condition, you write the diagnosed disease. Asbestosis, or the lead-related kidney condition, or whatever your doctor named. You do not write exposure as the condition. The VA is explicit that exposure by itself is not something they service connect, so the disease is the claim and the exposure is the cause.
So where do you actually submit it? Michael, walk them to the real starting line because a lot of people freeze at exactly this step.
The simplest path is online. Go to VA.gov and this is the page you want, how to file a VA disability claim. See the link on the left, File a Claim Online. That is the button. It walks you through the same sections we just looked at, and you upload your diagnosis and your statements as you go. No trip to an office required.
One timing tool most people leave on the table is the intent to file. Submitting an intent to file first sets a placeholder date, and when your full claim is later granted, your effective date and any back pay can reach back to that earlier moment. On a benefit that pays monthly, locking that date early can be worth real money.
So before you hit submit, gather your stack in one folder. Your discharge paperwork, the DD-214, plus any records that show your job or specialty. Your medical records with the diagnosis, any buddy statements you can get, and the nexus opinion if you already have it. A complete file on day one moves faster than one the VA has to keep chasing you for.
And here is my strongest piece of advice for the entire episode, and it costs you nothing. Do not do this alone. Watch what filing actually looks like. A person at a desk, form in front of them, trying to get every box right. An accredited veterans service organization does that part for you for free.
And that free part is not a sales pitch, it is the law. VA accredited representatives help you file at no charge, and you do not have to be a member. The big ones are the DAV, the VFW, and the American Legion. They know to name the specific substance and to line up the buddy statements. Use them.
So now it is concrete. The form is 21526EZ. You flag the toxic exposure in Section 4. You list the diagnosed disease in Section 5. You file free online or through a VSO, and you consider an intent to file to protect your date. One thing left, and it is the question underneath all of it. What does this actually pay, and what is the honest truth about your odds?
Let us talk about what these ratings actually pay, because that is the reason to fight for the claim. Mesothelioma, the cancer most tied to asbestos, is commonly rated at 100% under the respiratory schedule. Asbestosis and pleural conditions sit lower and vary more. They are rated on a range from 10 to 100% based on lung function breathing tests, the same ones people call PFTs. So two veterans with the same disease can land at very different numbers.
And here is the top number in real dollars, because people underestimate it. Watch the monthly check climb as we walk up to a full rating. Start with the base. A 100% rating pays a veteran with no dependents $3,938.58 a month, effective December 1, 2025. Add a spouse and it climbs to $4,158.17. And on the lead side, remember there is no single lead rating. The VA rates each condition it caused on its own schedule, so a kidney condition, a nerve condition, and high blood pressure each get evaluated and then combined into one number.
Now, because we care about you more than we care about a tidy ending, here is the honest truth, and it would be dishonest to skip it. This road is harder than a presumptive. There is no automatic grant. If your diagnosis is thin, or the exposure is vague, or you never get a nexus opinion, a direct claim can be denied where a presumptive would have been waved through.
So the honest recommendation is not blind optimism, it is a plan. If you have a real diagnosis and a believable exposure story, this is absolutely worth pursuing, and the payoff can be life-changing. If your evidence is thin right now, the move is to go build it. Get the diagnosis firmly documented, then get the nexus opinion, then file. And do not do the paperwork solo when a VSO will do it for free.
Think about what that plan looks like on a real person. Take a retired chief we will call Delgado, 68, a former machinist mate, now short of breath, whose doctor just found pleural plaques. His exposure is easy. His job was highly probable. What he is missing is the one-sentence nexus opinion. So his whole claim comes down to one appointment, and a VSO can line that up. That is the difference between thin and ready.
One more real fork worth naming, so we are not one-sided. Some veterans with a serious asbestos diagnosis also have a separate legal path, an asbestos trust or a lawsuit against the manufacturers, which is completely different from a VA claim and does not reduce it. That is its own decision with its own trade-offs, and it is worth asking a VSO or an attorney about, not something to figure out alone.
And let me be honest in the other direction too, because false hope helps no one. If your only asbestos finding is a set of stable pleural plaques with completely normal breathing, the rating can land at 0%. Which is a recognition without a monthly check. That is still worth filing, because it puts you on the record and protects you if the disease ever progresses. Just go in with clear eyes about where you might land.
If you forget everything else from today, remember this one line. Not on the presumptive list does not mean not a claim. Asbestos and lead are won by proving three things: a diagnosis, an exposure, and the link between them. And the VA grants those claims every single day of the year. That veteran who wrote in asking about red lead and asbestos, the honest answer is yes. You have a real path, and now you know exactly how to walk it. Let us bring it home. Asbestos and lead are not PACT Act presumptives, but they are absolutely claimable by direct service connection. Prove a diagnosis, an exposure, and a nexus. File it on Form 21526EZ. And a free VSO does the heavy lifting with you.
The piece I most hope sticks with you is the latency. Feeling completely fine today is not a reason to write this off, because these diseases are built to arrive decades late, long after your service ended.
So here is your move tonight. Pull up your own record, find your specialty on that exposure matrix, and you have already started the exposure leg of your claim. And in the next video, we go deep on the buddy statement, the exact way to write one that actually moves that exposure leg.
This whole episode exists because a veteran asked for it, so keep doing that. Drop your toughest VA question below and subscribe to the VA Benefit series, because we build one of these every week and yours might be next.
Here is the one we could not settle for you today, and it is honest. Were you in a highly probable job or a minimal one that still put you in the dust? Tell us in the comments because your answer helps another veteran see where they stand.
Quickly before we wrap, a small ask that actually matters. If this earned it, tap like and hit subscribe. Every one of those helps build the series so more people who need this can find it. Plan for the bad day and the good days take care of themselves.
That was a clean kill, Elena. No wasted words. 8.8. This is Professor Erica. Thanks for watching and signing off.